Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnan Jagadgurum Pada Padme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. Today is a very auspicious day, and we have all assembled here to celebrate the birthday of Srima Sharda Devi according to the Hindu calendar, the Janma Tithi. We all know that Srima Sharda Devi had a special role to play in the Ramakrishna, the divine Leela of Sri Ramakrishna. Swami Vivekananda once said that most of you have not understood the significance, the deep significance of the advent of Holy Mother Sri Sharda Devi. She came here with me, Sri Ma Sharda Devi as the center. He says Sri Ramakrishna wanted to regenerate or show what true empowerment, true spiritual empowerment of a woman can be in this modern world. So from next Tuesday, we will be starting a weekly talk, just as we have a talk on Thursday from 7 to 8 on the divine play of Sri Ramakrishna. I thought we should also discuss the divine play of Sri Ma Sharda Devi, which is a very comprehensive biography of Ma, the spiritual companion of Sri Ramakrishna. And Sri Ramakrishna, as Christopher Isherwood has famously said, that he is a spiritual phenomena. It's not just a human being who has incarnated or an incarnation, but he's a phenomena in the sense that the very thought currents of the world have undergone a massive change after his advent. And one of the main reasons why Sri Ramakrishna incarnated, first, according to Swamiji, was to see that the core, essential core of all religions, the different religions of the world as we see them now, they were in conflict with each other. And several sects within Hinduism in India, as well as the religions which entered India after the development of the so-called Vedic religion, which was the original Sanatan Dharma, so many religious sects were already there. And to create more confusion, newer religions came from abroad, and India became a crucible where all religious ideas, so many sects within Hinduism and sects which are different religions which came from outside India, they all mixed together, and several reform movements were started, like the Brahmo Samaj and the other reform movements which, and they believed that one can form a concept of a universal religion so that people can live in harmony with each other. That is what they believed. That these reformist movements, they thought that if we try to combine the essential elements of different religions, take a few things from this religion, take a few things from Christianity, take a few things, few ideals from Islam, and then the ancient Vedic religion, and try to mix them up and form a religion which is acceptable to all. But Sri Ramakrishna came and showed through his own life and message that it is not necessary to have a synthetic religion of this sort. One can be faithful to one's own religion. At the same time, he can have a not only a patronizing attitude towards others, a tolerant attitude towards other religions, but he can accept them as true. Each religion, depending on the follower who is the follower, or the aspirant who is trying to realize God or realize truth through that particular religion, is capable of taking him to the highest reality. So he preached the great universal idea of as many paths, as many faiths, so many paths, or as many paths, so many faiths. So there are different paths within the same religion. There are different sects which belong to a particular religion, and there are so many other religions which are in a way they appear to be totally different, but if you see the spiritual core of each of these religions, they essentially point to certain eternal truths, which that's why our religion, the Hindu religion, was known as Sanatana Dharma. That which is eternal cannot change. If it changes, then it is not eternal. Anything that is transitory cannot be eternal. So only the eternal principles, just as we have scientific principles which are eternal, which do not change even if the scientists who propound them change. They may disagree and they may find a greater truth, a higher truth, but that does not negate the lower truth as long as it is experimentally verified. So following that principle, Sri Ramakrishna in his own spiritual laboratory, that's why Isherwood calls him, his is a story of a phenomena, because such people very rarely come to this earth to show what true religion is. That was one of his principal roles, to show what the true spiritual aspect of religion, the eternal spiritual aspect, which is the basis of all religions, which throughout history we'll find different religions trying to reach the same path, a same goal by different paths. So he came to demonstrate that. That was one of the main reasons why he incarnated. But Swami Vivekananda pointed out another great reason, another important reason why Sri Ramakrishna incarnated. We all know that the idea of women's empowerment, or the empowerment of women, Shakti as it is known, has been a very old phenomenon, at least in India. In India, right from the Vedic days, society was not as male dominated as it is perhaps much later in the Puranic age. And now, of course, efforts are being made to remove whatever inequalities are there, gender inequalities are there. But all the attempts that are being made are in a very gross form. People are trying for socio-economic equality. They want women to participate in all the activities, the secular activities of life. And she expects that a woman is given equal opportunity as men. So everywhere this women's empowerment movement started more than 100 years ago. There were efforts made in different countries, especially the Western countries, to have a semblance of gender equality. So women's empowerment is not a new phenomena, but for the Vedic religion, when the wife of a person was known as a Sahadharmini, the very word Sahadharmini in Hinduism, it means that one who is a spiritual consort, or one who accompanies the male counterpart in his journey of dharma. Sahadharmini, one who helps the husband to carry out the different dharmic activities. So in every aspect of life, including religion, a woman was supposed to be an equal. There was no question of who is superior or who is inferior. That is why in Sanskrit language, it's the only language in the world where the dual case is used. When you do some kind of worship, sometimes we say in the singular, I worship. Or in other languages, there is this plural where we say we worship. We means it can be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But Sanskrit is the only language where this dvivachan or dual case is there, where they say that we too. So that was introduced because all the rituals, especially the religious rituals which took place in an Indian house in the Vedic days, I mean, they were incomplete if there was no woman with the man. The husband had to do all the rituals where the wife was an equal partner. That is why they used the Dvivachan. So all the Vedic rituals, except for those rituals which were practiced by brahmacharis or monastics, the householders, whenever they performed any Vedic ritual, it was always in the dual case, in the sense we too offer this. So the worship would be incomplete without the participation of the Sahadharmini or the wife. So that is why Swami Vivekananda said, to revive that Vedic ideal, Sri Krishna came with his spiritual consort. Though we can say that Sri Krishna was a sannyasin, in the sense he took formal sannyasa, but at the same time he accepted Sri Ma Sharda Devi and elevated her to the status of the Divine Mother through his worship. So when we try to understand the biography of Sri Ma Sharda Devi, which we will be discussing every Tuesday, Sri Sharda Devi and her divine play, she is respectfully among the devotees. The devotees refer to her as the Holy Mother, as the Holy Mother. So when we study her life in depth, when we try to understand what Swami Vivekananda meant, that Swami Sri Ramakrishna came to revive the ideal of motherhood of God. And he brought, in the process, he brought his Sahadharmini, or the spiritual consort, who was Sri Ma Sharda Devi, who lived for nearly 34 years after his passing away. So his mission, which was incomplete, the mission for which he came, true women's empowerment, he began the process, and it was demonstrated in the life of Sri Ma Sharda Devi, what true spiritual empowerment really means. So Sri Ramakrishna, according to Swami Vivekananda, raised the very concept of woman as a mother. And when he, in the process, he showed the way to true spiritual empowerment. Empowerment in other fields are definitely necessary, as it was initiated in America in the early in 1900, where Betty Friedan, who started the women's empowerment movement, and there were a lot of protests even in England and many other European countries, where women felt that history has not been kind to them. They felt that they don't have a equal role to play when it comes to the different aspects of society. So for they fought for socio-economic and also political liberty. Women wanted to liberate themselves. They tried for some kind of a semblance of equality and an empowerment which would enable them to participate in society, especially the socio-economic or the political aspects of human life. But one aspect that was neglected was the spiritual aspect. So most of the religious orders, if you find, or the religious movements, is still, after so many centuries, still dominated by men. But Swami Vivekananda said Sri Ramakrishna came to turn this topsy-turvy. He said, no, in this incarnation, with Sri Ma Sharda Devi as the center, as the central point, Sri Ramakrishna came to establish a spiritual parity. You can say a parity or a true, to demonstrate before the world what true spiritual empowerment of a woman is. So much so that Swami Vivekananda said that it was his intention to start the women's order, the monastic order which he started in the name of Sri Ramakrishna for men. Before that, he had plans, or he wrote a letter. In a letter he writes, and he also mentioned to his disciple Sharat Chandra Chakravarti, that his desire was to start a mutt for women, a monastery for women, which was unheard of, where the spiritual head would be a woman. They will not be subservient to any monastic order which was run by men. So he wanted a totally different, entirely independent, even the great Buddhist order, the Buddhist order of monks, when the disciples of Buddha requested Buddha to allow them to admit women who wanted to become nuns, beginning with Buddha's own wife, who became a great nun. But throughout the history, you will find that they always played a subservient role, and the uh, the spiritual head of the order would always be a man. Whereas Swami Vivekananda believed that Sri Ramakrishna came and brought Srima Sharda Devi with him and wanted to demonstrate before the world that a woman is capable to be the spiritual head of an organization, an independent organization where there would be no interference or no dependence on men. So that was spiritual empowerment would have been incomplete. Women have been competing in all other fields, the socio-economic fields, even politics. Women are increasingly uh, being empowered in different countries. You will find a lot of women are now empowered. They are becoming CEO of companies. They are running big companies. They are running big businesses. All that is fine. Swami Vivekananda believed that through education, equal education given to both men and women, there will be a sort of uh, empowerment which they can with which they can strengthen themselves. They can become independent. They need not depend, and that will make them more free. So that kind of freedom Swamiji wanted, to release them from the bondage through socio-economic and political freedom. But apart from that, he said the freedom of a woman is not complete unless she is spiritually independent also. It's not enough to be socio-economically or politically independent. That empowerment is necessary. But more than that, the spiritual empowerment, which was more important, will make a woman complete, and that spiritual empowerment was demonstrated in the life of Srima Sharda Devi. So if we try to discuss or try to analyze the life of Srima Sharda Devi, which we will be doing on a regular basis from Tuesday, you will find that if, according to the wonderful book Srima Sharda Devi and a Divine Play by Swami Chetananandji, who has taken a lot of pains to collect lot of material which was hitherto not available to the English readers. There were wonderful books in Bengali written by many people, many reminiscences, many incidents, which did not which was not a part of the earlier two biographies of Sri Ramakrishna, which were published in her centenary, during her centenary, 1954, 100 years after her birth. 1853 she was born, Holy Mother Sri Sharda Devi. So two biographies were published. One was published by Srimad Swami Gambhiranandji Maharaj. The other biography was published by Swami Tapasyanandji Maharaj, Srima Sharda Devi, her life and sayings. But this particular book, Sri Sharda Devi and her Divine Play, just as we discuss on Thursdays, Sri Ramakrishna, the great master, or Sri Ramakrishna and his Divine Play, here we'll find that this book contains a lot more information, or many more important incidents and events and messages of Holy Mother, which has been garnered from different sources, which were available only in Bengali or some other vernacular language. They were not available in English. And even if they were available, they were scattered all over the place. So Swami Chetananji has done a wonderful work by bringing all these thoughts together and very systematically arranging them and writing this beautiful biography, Srima Sharda Devi and her Divine Play. So in his book, he has divided the whole book into three parts. He says Holy Mother was born in 1853 and she passed away in 1920. So that whole life which you see, she can be divided conveniently into three parts, just as Sri Ramakrishna's great master has been divided into five parts. First is the Balya Leela, or the childhood and early youth. The second is a sadhana period, sadhak bhav. Sri Ramakrishna as a sadhaka, how he performed different spiritual practices and arrived at the same goal by different paths within Hinduism and outside of Hinduism, and followed other religions also. So through his own life, he demonstrated in a scientific manner the spiritual truths can be reached, the goal can be reached and can be realized or experienced if one is sincere to one's own path. So that is how he effected an harmony between the different paths. It is a harmony of paths. It's not that there will be only one religion and then your unity will come. That's what many religions, especially the Semitic religions, believe, that there should be only one truth, one religion, and all should be converted to that particular religion. But that's never going to happen. As long as human beings are diverse, they have diverse tastes, they have diverse geographies, they have diverse ethnicities, they have diverse uh, uh, character, they have diverse tendencies and likes and dislikes. As long as they have that, there will be a lot of sects. That is why Swamiji said every person can have his or her own religion. So you cannot disturb or destroy diversity. It is like trying to fix one coat to all the different people of different sizes. It's never going to happen. Everybody has to be given a coat of his size. So also in religion, India allowed a lot of freedom and said that every path, if it is genuine, if one follows it sincerely, leads to the same goal. So Sri Ramakrishna said that why only within Hinduism or the Sanatana Dharma? Even the other religions, if one practices it with sincerity, with the follows the essential principles of that particular religion, and does not fight over the external rituals and the external dogmas and doctrines, if that is prevented and we go to the core of every religion, we'll find that one can reach truth to any path, any religion, any sect. That is what Sri Ramakrishna demonstrated. He not only preached that, but he demonstrated. But that sadhaka bhava was necessary to show this unity. How in the midst of diversity, we can have unity. We can have a kind of unity which enables us to have a very liberal, universal approach to spirituality. That was the second part of his biography. And the third part of his biography, there are third and fourth part deal with his ministration or his uh, acceptance of different categories of disciples. Some were householders, some were monastics, some were following the middle path. They were unmarried, but they were neither monastics nor were they householders. So we had a variety of disciples coming to Sri Ramakrishna, which has been described beautifully in the Guru Bhav Purvardha and the Guru Bhav Uttarardha. Sri Ramakrishna is the Guru part 1, Sri Ramakrishna is the Guru part 2. So that was you can say, the third phase of his life. And finally, we come to the Antya Leela. Antya Leela means the last part of his life, when he selected his chosen disciples like Narendra and the monastic disciples and gave shape before he left to the order, and also instructed Holy Mother and gave her, handed over the charge, as it were, of his mission to her. And she was the mother who guided the entire organization, the entire Ramakrishna movement. Though it would be nice to call this a Ramakrishna Sharada movement rather than just Ramakrishna movement, because she had in fact an equal role or even a greater role to play. That was confirmed by Swami Sri Ramakrishna before he entered into Mahasamadhi. He said, I have done very little, you have to do much more. And she justified it. She had to live for nearly 34 years more, and he carried out that great tradition which Sri Ramakrishna had started. So it would be proper to say Ramakrishna Sharada movement. So that is how she complemented Sri Ramakrishna by by carrying out his mission, and particularly one aspect of it, the spiritual empowerment of women, or the expression of motherhood, true divine motherhood in a woman. So that is the real spiritual empowerment which she came to demonstrate. That's why she said, to demonstrate the ideal of motherhood, I have done more than what was what was asked of me. Sri Ramakrishna convinced her that you have to show the how spiritually how a woman can be spiritually empowered and live in the midst of society, living a very well balanced life. If you see the whole life of Sri Ma Sharda Devi, it is not just her training under Sri Ramakrishna, which was her first life. It is known as, we can divide the whole life into three parts. First was her Adi Leela, or the early Leela, which starts from 1853, the year in which she was born, to 1886. 1886 is the year in which Sri Ramakrishna entered into Mahasamadhi. So the first part, where she played second fiddle, you can say, she was not very prominent. She was not very conspicuous because she was always hiding in the Nabat. She was hardly approachable. In the sense, people could go to her, but she did not actively participate, so to say. At least it was not evident to the people, that hardly people knew where she would live, what she would do. She quietly led a very quiet life. That is her, that starting, she grew up in a rural village which was known as Jairambati, very near Kamarpukur, where Sri Ramakrishna was born. And she was married at a very young age, when Sri Ramakrishna, when she was still a child. So at the age of 18, till the age of 18, she lived in Jairambati with her parents. And then she, at the age of 18, she came to Dakshineshwar, where Sri Ramakrishna had already settled. He was worshipping the Divine Mother and lived with him off and on. Not that she lived continuously. Many times she used to go back to Kamarpukur or Jairambati and sometimes stay there for several months and come. So this portion, the first portion of her life, we can say that was her Adi Leela, which comprises of events which begin in 1853 and till the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna, 1886. Next, we'll find from 1886 to 1908, tentatively, this phase of her life has been divided and has been named as Madhya Leela, or the middle part of her life. That events that took place after the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna, 1886 to 1908. During this period, as we have discussed before, she went on a lot of pilgrimages, partly because she had no place to stay. The Kashipur garden house, which was hired by some of the devotees, the rent which they were paying, they could live there only for a few months more after the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna. So they had to vacate that house, and mother had to leave because it was difficult for her to stay in Kamarpukur or Jairambati. So because a lot of disciples of Sri Ramakrishna and all, they expected her to guide them after Sri Ramakrishna. So that was part of her mission. After Sri Ramakrishna's Mahasamadhi, she was expected, or at least they expected her, to be the guiding force and continue the Leela of Sri Ramakrishna. So they would have, they found it easy to keep to request Holy Mother and ask her to stay. But it was not till 1909 or 1910 when a house for Holy Mother was built, where she lived till 1920. Of course, often on she used to go to different centers of the order. Sometimes she used to go and stay in places like Banaras, Brindavan, and also Kamarpukur and Jairambati for quite some time. So the second part, or the Madhya Leela, we can say, she slowly started taking an active role in Sri Ramakrishna's spiritual ministry, what he had left incomplete She took it up from 1886. In the beginning, she was not so active. She went on certain places of pilgrimage, and then slowly after that, after undergoing various ordeals, she slowly began to conduct Sri Ramakrishna's spiritual ministry. And then the disciples started flocking around her, whether she was in Jairambati or Kamarpukur or Udbodhan. A large number of devotees who did not have the fortune to meet Sri Ramakrishna, or to be guided or to be initiated by Sri Ramakrishna. And even those who were initiated by Sri Ramakrishna used to come to her for guidance, especially the monastic disciples. Though they were scattered here and there, now and then they used to definitely uh, visit mother, whether she was in Jairambati, Kamarpukur. So that second part of her life is from 1887 or 1886, after Sri Ramakrishna passed away, to 1909, when she finally got a place of her own, which was her headquarters. After that, 1910, you will find mother living a lot, living for a long time, every year, for a great length of time in Udbodhan, or Mayarbadi as it was known. It was Swami Sharadanandji's idea to make a permanent place, which is now one of the important centers of the Ramakrishna mission, this Mayarbadi or Udbodhan. So that was the place where she, that was the place before, that was the third part of her life, the final Leela. In the beginning, in the middle part of her life, you can see she was traveling all over, initiating disciples, guiding people, but not in a very organized way. But afterwards, the Antya Leela, or the last portion of her life, 1909 to 1920, she was revealing her divinity and showering her spiritual treasures on everyone who came to her, whether people deserved it or not. When so even the president of the order, Swami Brahmananda, and other disciples, when they found that there are certain disciples whom they could not initiate, whom they did not wish to initiate, they used to send, and if somebody insisted, they will say, you go to mother, and mother is to initiate everybody without any distinction. She was just showering her. That was her capacity, wonderful capacity. She could digest all the different people from all walks of life who came to her. There were Hindus, of course, there were Muslims, there were other people who came, irrespective of the caste, creed, culture, ethnicity, and religion. People flocked to her. So it is definitely not possible to divide this life in this particular phase, because you will find some, right from her childhood, she was expressing some kind of divinity. Not that only in the third phase of her life she showered her spiritual treasures. She was born with divine gifts, and her compassion was there even in her Madhya Leela, or even the initial stages of her life, even when she was quietly living in Nahabat, a place where she used to cook. She used to stay and cook and serve the Holy Mother's mother, who was living till she lived. And even after that, she continued to live in that small room in Nahabat, and finally in another small room in Kashipur, which was very small and very inconvenient, but she stayed there. And after that, after the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna, as we see, we come to the second part of her life. And finally, the third part, which was spent in Udbodhan when she had her own house. So we'll find, though there are different phases of her life, it is sort of, there is a lot of common events you will find in these three phases. So though in a general way we can say that the first few chapters, or the first phase of her life, she was preparing, or she was being trained by Sri Ramakrishna, apparently. And there is one interesting thing which Master Mahasaya noted, that Sri Ramakrishna was not only training her in spiritual matters, but even in small things. It was really interesting to see the great teacher Sri Ramakrishna teaching the young Sarada, because she was comparatively young in age when she came to Dakshineshwar. She was hardly 18. So She was not knowing the ways of city life. Calcutta was a city. She was living in a village. So many people used to come daily. So how to manage everything, how to administer everything, how to spend money wisely, how to not waste things, even how to light lamps, everything Sri Krishna taught her. So that was the first part of her life, the Adi Leela, where she was initiated into the divine play by Sri Krishna by various means. He trained her to prepare her to become a world teacher later on. So from then we'll find in the second part of the biography, we will discuss how she took it forward after the passing away of Sri Krishna and demonstrated how one can practice spirituality in our own life. In a very, very busy life, in a householder setting, living with many of her biological relatives, some of whom were uh, causing a lot of problems to her. And there were other monastic disciples and other disciples, householder disciples who used to come to mother for solace because they missed Sri Ramakrishna so much. So she demonstrated through her own life how the four yogas, how she used to work day and night continuously. She would be active. At the same time, she would get up early in the morning, and she once said that she used to do more than 100,000 japa every day in spite of such a hectic schedule. So she never neglected her spiritual practices, and all the yogas you can see in the middle part of her life. She was practicing these things and demonstrating before the world that how one can, even when one is living in a very busy householder setting, one can still find time and maintain a calm dignity in spite of all the problems, in spite of all the ups and downs of life. There was so much uncertainty in her life. But as she herself said, I do not know what sorrow is. She was always in joy. Physically, there were so many hardships she had to face. There was no food, there was no money, because whatever little money Sri Ramakrishna had arranged as by way of pension, which he had arranged to see that some 7 rupees per month would be given to Holy Mother, because she used to stay in Kamarpukur. She had her own expenses and there were so many guests. But even though 7 rupees were discontinued, some people out of jealousy went and told the temple management that you don't need to give her. She is already, there are so many disciples who are looking after her. So in spite of all these troubles, she herself said that the japa that she did, the sadhana that she did, that enabled her to maintain a stately attitude. She never lost her dignity. It was a calm, composed life, unemotional life, you can say, full of compassion, no doubt. She used to feel a lot. She used to feel she could not see suffering people, but she made so light of her own suffering, and a spontaneous, you can say, outpouring of love and compassion. And that third part of her life that revealed her true nature. Till then, she was hidden. When Sri Ramakrishna's, the first part, when she was young and she just had come to Dakshineshwar, it was Sri Ramakrishna was the center of all the spiritual training that was going on. But after his passing away, there was an intermediate phase. But in the third phase, especially after she got her own home and in Udbodan, then we'll find that her spontaneous love and compassion was showered upon all, and she revealed her true nature. Till then it was hidden, as Sri Ramakrishna had said that she has hidden her spiritual nature from public gaze. She hardly expressed her spirituality in public, as Sri Ramakrishna demonstrated, used to go into samadhi day and night. But we hardly find such incidents or events in the life of Holy Mother. except some of the close disciples who had a glimpse into her wonderful spiritual states she used to have. But normally she kept all these things to herself, and but still her true nature was revealed in the last phase, and she bestowed a sort of some kind of fearlessness upon her disciples and devotees. So people felt, as we discussed in the Gospel of Holy Mother, Shirod Bala Roy, who became a widow at a very young age, she says, when one came in the presence of Holy Mother, one felt that one can be fearless. There was nothing to fear, as Mother would take care of everything. So this revelation of her true nature and bestowing the fearlessness, bestowing a sense of fearlessness, which comes out of a spiritual conviction, a shraddha in the spiritual reality, in the eternal nature of the spirit, which she could convey, which she could, with her grace, people could experience. That is why once when Latu Maharaj was meditating and closing her eyes, when Holy Mother was doing some kind of cooking, she was cooking some food and he was supposed to help her. But he was very fond of meditations. He was closing his eyes and sitting in the shrine. So somebody went and told him, he who is the goal of your life, whom you are trying to attain, she herself is cooking. Why don't you go and help her? You'll get everything if you serve her. You don't have to close your eyes. You can just open your eyes and she will give you whatever is necessary. So in the Ramakrishna movement, we firmly believe, everybody firmly believes, as Sri Ramakrishna used to often say, without the help of Shakti, there cannot be any spiritual progress. So unless there is the grace of the Divine Mother, Shakti, because when we are living in this relative world, the world which is undergoing transformation every day, every moment it is undergoing transformation. So many uncertainties of life, they come and they go. We are not even sure of what will happen tomorrow. There's this play of Sattva, Rajas and Tamas. The Prakriti is playing her own drama. And that has so much of uncertainty and chaos, unless you touch the spirit. But how to do it? It is easier said than done. We may think that we will hold on to the permanent, we'll hold on to God, we'll hold on to the eternal, and all the things will be harmoniously arranged. As Swamiji said, manifest the divinity which is within. Try to touch the spirit and you'll see all the confusion, all the struggles, everything will be harmoniously solved. It seems to be a very easy way, but the problem is how to hold on to the spirit, how to hold on to God under the most trying circumstances. This was exactly what Holy Mother demonstrated. It was Holy Mother who demonstrated, because her life, if you see the entire life, whether it was the first part of her life, the Adi Leela, Madhya Leela or Antya Leela, if you take all the three phases of her life, there was hardly any year or hardly any period where she had no suffering. Either it is poverty or maybe the mad relatives who were whom she was taking care of, her own brothers who were after who wanted money, who were quarreling, and there were so many issues which were created by her own biological family, that but she chose not to desert them. She took care of all of them, plus took care of all her sons who were the monastics, plus guided the order, plus gave spiritual initiation or mantra diksha to innumerable people without even judging them. Anybody who came, anybody who asked for initiation would get it. And not only that, after that, she used to assure them and bestow some kind of fearlessness, abhaydan as it is known. That fearlessness which comes, a conviction that comes to the disciple that I am the child of the mother. She used to make every disciple or every person who came to her, that is the universal motherhood she demonstrated. Everybody who came to her, whether he was young or old, whether he was ignorant or full of knowledge, whether he was a householder or a monastic, anybody who came to her left with a conviction that God alone is real, that Mother, Divine Mother alone is real. So that conviction, which is so difficult to acquire, it requires years and years of sadhana to even acquire a semblance of that Shraddha. But because of Holy Mother's grace and because she revealed her true nature through her compassion, through her love and compassion which she had for all the human beings. Because when Sri Krishna passed away before his Mahasamadhi, once called Holy Mother and said, can you not see these people from Calcutta? By Calcutta, I meant people who are coming to them, who were immersed in many of the worldly activities. And people of Calcutta are just struggling like worms. Why don't you help them? Why don't you do? So she said, what can I do? I am a mere woman. That was the normal reply a woman would give. Any responsibility, she had a kind of inferiority complex. In the sense, she represented the women of that period. And just, it was a divine play, no doubt. Perhaps she definitely was aware of her own greatness. But to show to the entire world that in an age where women were not used to taking responsibilities, she says, I am a woman, what can I do? Sri Ramakrishna said, you can do much more than what I can. So this was the assurance Sri Ramakrishna gave her, and she fulfilled that job. Show that the world, a spiritually empowered woman can do much more than a spiritually empowered man. He came and played, you can say, a secondary role, and asked Mother to take up the mission, or take up the spiritual ministration. And but all these things, all the wonderful spiritual grace and the spiritual power that was manifest was hidden. It was not displayed the way Sri Ramakrishna displayed it. Her simple and pure life, it inspires us. It is her modesty, her humility. They overwhelm us. You'll find so much of humility in spite of all the spiritual greatness. And her love and compassion, they conquer our hearts. Her struggle, her suffering, what purpose do they serve? Why did she have to do all the struggle? It is to strengthen us to face all the difficulties of life. So that's why she voluntarily uh, embraced all the different sufferings. Though she could have avoided, she voluntarily embraced all those struggles just to demonstrate and show. Then we can see the contentment, as she used to always say, Holy Mother used to say, there is no virtue greater than contentment. And it is true. In our life, we see how much of discontentment, anything we get, we are not happy. We want something more. I am not talking of the spiritual discontent, which is very much necessary. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, just convert your material or the worldly discontent into spiritual discontent. And if you feel that, oh, I have to do so much of spiritual sadhana, I've done nothing, that kind of contentment is good. But her contentment of whatever she got, she had no strong likes or dislikes. Whatever came by chance, she accepted it. Whether she could stay in a house or a pilgrimage, whatever the disciples had arranged, she had no choice. She herself agreed to undergo all these trials and tribulations, and she was indifferent to richness or poverty. So when we confront some kind of poverty or some kind of when we think that there are a lot of people who are richer than us, we become disgruntled, said that we deserved more but we don't get. But she never complained. The 7 rupees she was getting, that was discontinued, and she didn't care for that. So her forbearance, suffering various diseases in Calcutta in those days, malaria, dysentery, rheumatism, and so many diseases were very common, and she suffered from most of them. Towards the end of her life, she could not bend her feet. But why did she have to suffer? When she said, I have done more than any woman would do to demonstrate what true spiritual empowerment or true motherhood is. So when she said that, she meant that she gave us a lot of encouragement to endure our illnesses silently. And her grace and forgiveness, especially the quality of forgiveness which she had. So many people troubled in various ways. Radhu and her mother, and then her own brothers used to every day practically come and quarrel in front of her. So she used to be very practical when handling these things through unselfish service, complete self-surrender to God, her master, Sri Ramakrishna, who was her all in all. So that's why we, in a famous verse, it is said, Ramakrishna Gata Prana, one who was one with Sri Ramakrishna. She never felt that Sri Ramakrishna was somebody who was alien to her. Sri Ramakrishna and Ma Sharda are two sides of the same coin. So you will find that she demonstrated the highest truths of practical Vedanta. We talk of practical Vedanta, but she spoke very little. People do not come to her to ask questions about, like they asked. A lot of scholars used to come, a lot of Brahmos used to come, people from different sects used to come to Sri Ramakrishna and ask so many questions. But in the Holy Mother's setting, the way she lived her life, it was just pure practice of practical Vedanta in her daily life. And she showed how to harmoniously reconcile active life with a meditative life. Nobody did more japa than her, but she never complained that she had so much of work. Whether she was working, whether she was cooking for a large number of people, she never missed her early morning routine of getting up at 3 and doing her meditation and trying to complete. She used to say that 100,000 repetitions of the mantra. She had no need to do it, but she demonstrated that if I can do it, you can at least do 100th part of it. So, for lost and weary souls, people who feel themselves as without any support, for them, she was a great support. And her light and her message, her life and her message helped these people who would have been without, because many of the direct disciples were unable to help certain people. Even in the case of some of the monastics, for example, when Kali Krishna Maharaj was struggling, he had some problems when he was meditating, and Swami Brahmananda immediately sent him, said, go to your guru, go to your guru and ask her, because it is impossible for us to help you. So immediately she gives her some piece of advice and touches her heart, touches his heart, and then Virajananji totally regains his spiritual confidence, and then he goes on to become one of the presidents of the order, the fifth president of the Ramakrishna order. So as a novice, problems which even Swami Brahmananda and others could not solve, Holy Mother, by her mere touch, a simple life full of compassion and love, divine love, people used to go to her, get their problem solved. Some of them used to go with very lot of worldly problems. She patiently heard everybody. It's not that but she was so practical that she gave the right advice at the right time. That is why she used to say that everybody, she was the ideal teacher who could lift a man or a woman from where he or she was. She did not expect all to come with the same spiritual capacity. So it was her wonderful compassion, it was her wonderful life which shows us how true spiritual empowerment, what true spiritual empowerment is, what true motherhood of God as Father has been worshipped in many cultures. In the Indian culture, of course, the idea of Shakti Puja or worship of the Divine Mother was there. But of late, I mean, when Sri Ramakrishna incarnated, perhaps there was a lot of criticism, especially the Brahmos who did not like the concept of Kali or all these things, because they did not understand the inner significance of worship of God as the Divine Mother. For them, they just borrowed some ideas and they said God is the all pervading reality, He is without form. But why should you insist on that? Can we not, if we can imagine God to be a formless uh, person, if a Father in heaven or any formless person who showers His grace sitting in the clouds above, then why can't He come in the form of a woman? Why does He have to come in the form of a man alone? Why God should be considered only as Father? He can be the mother. So true to the Indian spiritual tradition, Sri Ramakrishna came to re-establish, not establish, re-establish, because somehow down the line, because of lot of ideas we got from alien cultures who came and who uh, did not understand the importance of worship of God as the Divine Mother. So Sri Ramakrishna, one of the third important role he did was to initiate the worship and tell the world that the attitude of a child to the mother is the most purest and the best attitude. So if you consider God to be your mother, it's not just the biological aspect of gender that mother, even if Sri Ramakrishna can be considered as one's mother. So the biological aspects are too gross. Motherhood implies compassion, unconditional love, and a lot of tolerance. So you find amongst all the species, whether it is animals or human beings, the species, the feminine species who gives birth to children, they have that spirit of sacrifice. They have the spirit of love. So you will see very often, you will find mothers who have very problematic children or evil children, but still the mother's love does not change. A mother's love cannot be compared to any other love. That is why Sri Ramakrishna Swamiji once said, next to God's love, it is mother's love which is the most supreme. If you consider human love, among all the other aspects of human love, the mother's love towards the child, this is known as Santan Bhav. So that Santan Bhav, to demonstrate that if you worship God as the mother, you can make rapid spiritual progress, which was told many times in the past in our tantras and many other scriptures. But somehow Indian people seem to have forgotten it, and the whole world needed a different orientation from God the Father. It's a very good idea, but why not God the Mother at the same time? So millions and millions of people, not only in the East but also in the West, it was very strange to find that Holy Mother's teachings and life, after it was published in 1953, found more more and more followers in the West than in the, of course, in the East she was respected and many people like to read, but the Western women found her, that's what Swami Vireshwaranandji Maharaj once said, that it was rather surprising that Holy Mother, who very often people are introduced to Ramakrishna Vivekananda tradition by reading books on Vivekananda, reading books on Sri Ramakrishna, and these wonderful books were published long before Holy Mother's gospel or biography was published. But as soon as it was published, there were a lot of women, especially the Western women, who found this ideal to be very refreshing because they were searching for some ideal. And though there was empowerment, they were also fighting for their rights, fighting for some kind of equality, and they got it also. In many countries, the women's empowerment movement became very strong, but still they felt unfulfilled. For example, Betty Friedan, she wrote her last book was, though she wrote many books, The Feminine Mystic and other books, and she became a very popular women's empowerment leader in America in those days. But towards the end of her life, she expressed her inability to, she said that in the mad race to compete with men, I left one aspect unaddressed, and that was woman as the mother. This aspect of motherhood, this wonderful, compassionate ideal of motherhood, somehow down the line, she says, I missed it. And as a result, you will find that the spiritual empowerment movement which she had initiated, she and many other women leaders were there, which took place in the socio-economic and political field. They started quarreling, they started fighting for their rights, they got it also, but somehow that fulfillment was not there, because the role of a woman as a mother is one of the most primary roles in human society. The father cannot be replace the role of mother in a family. So it's the mother who has a unique place in the scheme of life anywhere in the world. A mother is a mother wherever she is. So this aspect of the motherhood, a motherhood as an ideal in itself, not only motherhood of God, but motherhood of the motherhood which we see in human society, to establish this order on a firm basis, Holy Mother incarnated. So we started late, so I took a few minutes more. So today we will conclude, and we wish all of the devotees a very happy Mother's Day, Holy Mother's birthday. It's a very auspicious day for all of us, and we'll pay, I mean, for every one of us, it would do a lot of good if we study her life and message in depth. That's why we have decided to start Tuesday. Normally, Sri Ramakrishna used to say that Tuesday is Mother's Day. Among all the days of the week, there are a few days which are specific. For example, Monday is he used to dedicate to Shiva. It is supposed to be Shiva's day. So different deities have different days. Hanumanji is normally worshipped on Shanivar or Saturdays. So there is a tradition, especially in India, that Mangalwar is Divine Mother's Day. So every Tuesday from 7 to 8, we will discuss the wonderful book Sri Ma Sharda Devi and her divine life. So it will be an excellent companion to the great master, which we are discussing on Thursday. And because many of the devotees have requested me to start it a bit late, so that if it is on weekdays, they can attend it. So that's why it will be a little inconvenient or almost impossible for people in India to attend. But then it will be easier for those who are in the UK or USA to attend this great, this wonderful biography, to discuss and to meditate on the wonderful life and message of Sri Ma Sharda Devi, as beautifully propounded or beautifully written in the book Sri Ma the Holy Sri Ma Sharda Devi and her divine play. So if there are some questions, I would just take up a few questions and we'll conclude for today, and wish you all a very happy Mother's Day. Yeah, there is a question. Swamiji, the ideal is this: spiritual empowerment is necessary and other empowerment is sufficient. Is it sufficient to achieve real divine power? I could not get the question, but I think what you mean is all the other empowerment. I'm not saying the other empowerments are not necessary. We need women who are able to have some kind of parity with men as far as jobs are concerned, as far as professions are concerned, as far as decision making is concerned in the homes. That is also very important. Why should it be that only the man in the house will take a decision, as it normally happens in India? Sometimes women were not even consulted. So there are these these ideas of empowerment was a very popular movement in the West. They, Betty Friedan and the others who started this feminine through her book Feminine Mystic and many other books, she she appealed to all the women not to give up their inhibition and decide what they want to do with their own lives. Said, why should we always depend on somebody else, especially men? So that was a noble idea, no doubt, but that is not sufficient. So other empowerments, they may be useful at a lower level. Definitely they are useful. One should have education, one should have the freedom to decide what one should do. And the less you depend on others, as Swamiji said, dependence is misery always. One who is independent is less miserable. Those who depend more will be more miserable. So any kind of independence, physical independence, material independence, career wise, and independence is definitely going to empower a woman. But that is what Swamiji said, that it would be an incomplete empowerment. You can't just establish a parity. There are certain biological differences, but there is one quality with in which forms part of women's empowerment, which is the idea of motherhood. So Swami Vivekananda said that was the central message Holy Mother gave. You can compete in several fields, several aspects of social life, economic life. There's no harm in doing that. But there is one aspect of life which a woman has a definite advantage, and that is the ideal of motherhood. The superiority of the ideal of motherhood, or the, you may say, true empowerment can be had if a woman feels empowered as Holy Mother used to feel. It's not just the biological motherhood which is referred to here. People think just giving birth to children doesn't mean that one is a mother. Motherhood here, for example, when Rabindranath Tagore addressed Sister Nivedita as the Lokamata, when he said Lokamata, she is the mother of, that divine motherhood was through that woman, that disciple of Swamiji, Margaret Noble. She demonstrated in her own life that one need not biologically give birth. Even Holy Mother never gave birth to any children. When she was asked, Sri Ramakrishna said, so many people will call you mother that you will be tired of hearing that. Everybody will feel that you are their mother. So that is what Sri Ramakrishna told Holy Mother. And same thing with Sister Nivedita. When people addressed her as Lokamata, she was like a mother to many people. Mother to scholars, mother to freedom fighters, mother to especially young women, young girls who were uh, coming to her school, to whom she taught what true empowerment is. With Srima Sharda Devi's guidance and her advice, and also support and inspiration, it was Sister Nivedita who, though did not give birth to children, she demonstrated the ideal of motherhood to innumerable children, girls who used to come to her school, and other people who came, including the great Aurobindo. Most of them, they came to her and she guided them just as a mother would guide their children. So that is what is meant by true spiritual empowerment. So we'll conclude today. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat. Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.